Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Dear students, welcome back to our subjects, business ethics. Today's topic is about the rational organization. In today's outcome, students should be able to discuss the moral duty in organizations. And here, when we talk about the moral duty, we may refer to policies and different regulations as practices adopted by the company. Explain the conflict of interest. And this is a very sensitive issue here. We have to consider as talking about the rational organization. Discuss or the difference between the bribes and gifts. Evaluate the insider trading. Discuss company duty to employees. As you said before, this can be a set of rules and policies adopted by the company. However, we need to discuss this in terms of whether such kind of duties or practices adopted by the company is actually practical, and whether or not they're applied. On the other hand, we need to discuss the employee rights. And finally, we need to explain the disclosure of wrongdoing, a process, the way and how it should be treated by company as a feedback. So, regarding these outcomes, we will cover the following contents. The first one is the moral duty in organization. We will need also to talk about the conflict of interest. We will talk about the bribes and gifts. We will also talk about the company duty to employees and the rights of employees. And finally, we will talk about how wrongdoing is revealed in organization. Now, the traditional rational model of the business organization defines it as a structure of formal relationships. Now here we're talking about top management represented by the employer and the employees who may be represented by unions. Now, as we talk about the rational organization, the traditional rational model here of business organization defines its structure of formal relationships. So the point here, when we talk about the rational model, we should talk about things to be clear within the company or within the organization structure in terms of the authority used, the structure adopted, the different tasks and duties by employees, and the like. So such things can somehow designed to achieve the goal of the company efficiently and effectively. Besides, the charts that the company uses actually identify its formal hierarchies of authorities. As we discussed before, exemplifies the fundamental reality of the organization. So companies can also be different in terms of the number of functions they have. So in some companies we have financing, we have production, we have customer relation, we have other departments that are affiliating or are related to the type and the nature of the business. So that is why the structure can tell about such kind of authority and the functions adopted by these different businesses. However, when we talk about this kind of rationality, we have to talk about moral duty. So we're talking about a company with certain kind of authority on top of this company, top management. However, how should this kind of authority be used? We have a nowadays business, or one of the contemporary terms discussed in regards to this is the law of agency. So the law of agency represents how work is actually done in terms of decisions by top management and the board of directors. So actually the work toward the goals of the firm. The law of agency also specifies the legal duties of the employees toward their principals, the managers, top management, and from top management to the owners through the board of directors. So here, do nothing that conflicts with them while working for the firm. So the point here, if we're talking about the companies in terms of owners and principals, and in terms of the employees, the basic duty here is to achieve the goal of the firm in a way that maintains the interests of the owners and also keep the good interests of the employees. So, what do we mean by conflict of interest? Here, the employees may have a private interest in the outcome of a task in which, of course, they are involved or engaged. So here, self-interest induces employee to act in ways that may not be in the best interest of the firm. By this, we may have a clash regarding the interests of the company and the interests of the employee. So the point here, we have different goals set by the company, and that these goals are actually achieved by the employees. If for some reasons those employees may have to have their own, or they may use resources of the company to achieve their own and pursue their own interests, then we have a clash between the interests of the company and that of the employees. So in that regard, employees of a company hold another job or consultancy outside the firm, which in turn clash with the interests of the company. So that is why companies in nowadays business discuss the agency theory, and they also discuss any kind of any potential conflict of interest that may arise in companies at different level of departments, of course, or even within functions. Now, the conflict of interest may be either actual or potential. So the point here, we're trying to eliminate any kind of actual conflict of interest because that is quite obvious. It goes against the objectives of the company, and it is, of course, unethical. While some of the times the clash here, the conflict of interest, can also be potential. So the difference here, the actual conflict occurs when a person discharges his or her duties in a manner prejudicial to the firm. In other words, there is an action, and that action was actually meant to pursue the interests of the employee, not the company itself. And this can be even in top management, at top management level, or operational levels, or even in front desk kind of works. This conflict can also be potential, and a potential conflict occurs when a person is merely motivated or even tempted to do so, but maybe because of the circumstances do not allow him or her, so such kind of conflict or action didn't take place. So the point here, this has so far not affected the company's interest, but actually there is a willingness to act on the interests of the employee, not the company itself. So, regarding the conflict of interest, we said that as contractual agreement impose moral duties, so actual conflicts of interest are clearly immoral. An employee, according to the employment contract, is supposed to handle certain tasks and duties which are actually meant to achieve the company's objectives. If for some reasons this, for example, couldn't happen because of the employees being more overwhelmed in doing his own interest, then this will go directly against that contract, and accordingly, of course, will become immoral. While on the other hand, potential conflicts of interest may or may not be ethical because so far this has not yet happened. Now, bribes and gifts. Bribes and extortion are unethical and create clear conflicts of interest. Now we're talking about a company that has its own objectives. Now, talking about bribes or even gifts, we're directly talking about the employee's interests, which may directly collide with the interests of the company itself. So accepting gifts may or may not be ethical depending on a number of efforts. Of course, here we're talking about gifts not bribes. Bribe is actually meant to either pursue someone's interest or the employee's interest on the interest of the company itself. So the bribe is actually illegal, while gift can also be justified according to the scenario or the context where it happens. And here comes some of the questions. What is the value of the gift itself? So considering the value, if it's very expensive for a person holding a high-ranking position in a company, then such gift can also be meant to be a bribe. Besides, what is the purpose of that gift? So a decision-making process can take, for example, certain kind of procedures. If the gift was meant to accelerate that process, then we consider it as a bribe. What is the accepted practice in the area? Some companies may somehow, in some culture, in some countries, for example, it becomes something ordinary. The practices accepted in certain areas where people can accept gifts can also differentiate whether this is a bribe or a gift. Besides, the company's policies can directly define these gifts, the nature of gifts, and the occurrences of such gifts as bribes. Furthermore, what are the circumstances under which the gift was given? So, if we consider the timing and the place, beside the authority, the level of authority where such gifts are actually concerned, okay, can also indicate whether this gift is a bribe or not. And finally, what is the position of the recipient? Now, the one who receives that gift actually can tell or indicate whether this is a real gift based on friendship, or it is meant to pass some kind of laws, pass some kind of decisions. Another issue that we may have in companies is about theft. Employees have a contractual agreement to accept only specific benefits in return for their services. And this is what we refer to as the compensation system, in which we have the wages, salaries, incentives, benefits, etc. For that reason, any extra kind of return that an employee may have can also be seen as a theft. So the illegal use of company resources and any other appropriation of benefits by the employee. So that is why in a contract we have all these things defined as benefits. That is to define any kind of extra resources used by companies as a theft. So in that sense, theft can be either a resource misuse, including whatsoever resources, raw materials, appliances, devices, even the time of the company for doing something personal. It can also be fraud in terms of misusing information for the sake of handling or pursuing self-interest. Falsification, providing also false information, and padding of expense accounts. The manipulation of figures and numbers in accounts for the good interest of the employee is also considered to be a theft. Besides the selling of office supplies, which is quite obvious to be one of the issues considered to be a theft. Now, what is the company duty to the employees? Now, talking about rationality and rational organization, we should also talk about the duties by both employees to company and, of course, company to employees. As we start with the company duty to employees, a main moral duty to employees, of course, is the fair wage and the fair working condition. These are the two main elements we can consider as the basic duties from companies toward the employees. We said before that the compensation is actually the financial return for the employees doing something for the company. And in that return, we get the compensation benefits, including wages, benefits, incentives, etc. So the fair wage is actually compared to the amount of work handled and the nature of the tasks. Besides, working condition can also evaluate or can also matter in that regard. So companies will need to consider certain factors. For example, what is the going wage in the industry and the area? In order for the wage to be fair, we have also to consider the external parties. This is referred to as competitiveness. So the company doesn't want to offer a salary that is less than that offered by competitors. Besides, what could be the firm's capability, including the financial capability of the firm itself? What is the nature of the job? The job itself can also be one of the factors where fair wage can discuss. For example, a physician's kind of nature, the nature of the work of physician, for example, is quite complicated comparing to a lecturer. An office work is not like outdoor work. So the number of challenges, the task, duties, responsibilities, the kind of relationship, all can help in determining and defining the main wage of the business itself, of the job itself. So this is referred as compensable factors. And these factors can tell us about the worth of each of these jobs. The worth of these jobs. Besides, another question is, what are the minimum wage laws adopted by the country where these companies operate? And what are the local costs of living? So the cost of living may also differ from one place to another. So especially considering international businesses where they have a lot of subsidiaries and branches around the world. Such kind of companies also consider the living costs. Another dimension is the work or the working condition. So the working conditions are actually equally important to wages, especially talking about those difficult kind of tasks. For example, 10% of the U.S. job force suffers a job-related injury or illness each year. So in that regard, a contract between employer and an employee is not fair if wages are not proportional to the risk. As the amount of risk increases, here, and given, for example, jobs, so does the salary or the wage. So the more risk, the more compensation, benefits, incentives employees should also get. It can also not be fair if it doesn't reflect the dangers of high-risk jobs. Working with people, for example, like a police officer, is not just like working indoor. It won't be fair if it doesn't provide suitable health insurance programs. Nowadays, this is one of the basic benefits offered by most of the companies. So one of these benefits offered to companies is to employees working in a company is actually an amenable and a suitable health insurance programs that can help the employees carry on the work without worrying about their own health or the health of their own kids and family members. On the other hand, there are some rights by the employees toward the company itself. For example, employees' rights to privacy here must be balanced against employers' rights to know certain information about their activities as follows. For example, the relevance of the information, the kind of information that has got something to do with the job. This is very important, and that the employee has right to offer such kind of information to the managers. So companies must limit the inquiry to areas that are directly relevant to the issue at hand. consent. The consent of the employees themselves here, they must accept. Employees must also accept to offer such kind of information asked or that employers may ask. So here, employees are free to give or withhold consent regarding investigation about their private lives. Besides the methods here, companies must use ordinary and reasonable methods of inquiry, getting information, unless otherwise circumstances are extraordinary. So, as you said before here, information is something that companies would like to get about employees for many purposes, for example, hiring, and for purposes of promotions, job career, etc. However, employees have rights here in the sense that this information should only be job relevant. They must be informed of such kind of request, so information can also be given willingly to the company, and the method of gathering the information should also be accepted by the employees. Now our last point is about disclosure of wrongdoing. We have a term that is referred to as a whistleblowing. A whistleblowing here is an attempt by an employee to disclose wrongdoing in the company where he works. So an individual worker, an individual employee may notice something wrong happening in the company. This can be in terms of doing the business itself, dealing with clients, ingredients used in the product, the way the service is formed and offered to the customer, the way the accounts are actually handled, etc. And this can take two forms. Either internally, so an internal disclosure of such kind of information, if it's reported only to management within the organization. So the employee will raise such kind of problem to the top management. There's something wrong in the company and that you have to take an action. It can also be an external. If it's reported to others, such as governmental agencies or the media, where the employee tells the media that there's something wrong happening in the company, either about the product or the service, ingredients, price, etc. So here, a whistleblowing can have heavy personal costs, but of course justified when the firm's activity is seriously harming the others. Now it becomes a must that employees should inform either top management or external parties like governmental agencies or even the media. It is also justified to prevent it by informing management have failed. For example, such kind of problems have already been raised to the top management, but actually nothing has happened so far. So maybe external kind of reporting can help solve the problem. If it's certain that the whistleblowing will prevent the harm, so the consequences of doing or disclosing such kind of wrongdoing by the company itself can help prevent the harm from happening. And at that level, it becomes very much justified, even if heavy personal costs are actually acquired.
Now, dear students, we come to the end of our session. We talked about different issues. We discussed the moral duty in an organization. We also talked about the conflict of interest that may happen in companies, especially talking about high-ranking officers. And we also talked about bribes and gets, the difference among these or between these two terms, and how to differentiate a gift from a bribe. We evaluated the insider trading. We also talked about and discussed the company duty to employees. We talked about different rights employees have in companies. And finally, we discussed the disclosure of wrongdoing, the consequences, and the mechanism. By this, we come to the end. We have an assignment attached to this topic where you have to address these questions based on your understanding and the way that you think these issues had to be tackled by companies. We come to the end here. Thank you very much for listening. See you inshallah next week. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa